Mercedes, wide chip, Ricky.
Zebra left, 75, Katie, Omaha. We're good.
The Sleeper Wire Pro-Am is back.
It's time to go eat, baby. Let's eat.
This is our third season and the biggest one yet. We had 2 leagues last year, and we're looking to double that this year. You, the listeners, get to play in a real fantasy football league with pros and shows from around the industry. Last year, we had a great roster. We had Marcus Grant, Jake Seeley, Matt Harmon, Sleeperbot, the Fantasy Football Fellas, Eat Sleep Fantasy, and many more. And we're expanding that to include more pros and shows than ever.
Stop talking about it, man. Let's get this going right now.
Visit www.sleeperwire.com/pro-am for more details. Welcome, everybody, to the Sleeper Wire Show. Yes, that is right. You're getting a bonus episode this week. I am your host, Professor Chris. Today is Friday, May 11th, and I am super excited to introduce our guest. First time on the show, Justin Boone. He's the NFL Supervising Editor and Fantasy Analyst at The Score, and you can find him on Twitter at Justin Boone. Justin, what's going on, man?
Not too much. I'm just super excited that the draft's over and the rosters are mostly set. You know, we kind of have a good idea where everybody's going to be. There's still a few guys out there like Dez. We'll see where they'll land, but it's nice now. We finally know where people are and we can react accordingly.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have to watch any of those stupid NFL mock drafts like by Mel Kiper or Todd McShay or whoever, just because they're never right, and it just takes up valuable baseball time on SportsCenter.
Yeah, I mean, as someone, I've done mocks, the last couple of years, and, I did okay. I did the Fantasy Pros competition this year. I think I finished 30th out of 130 or something like that, but I expected to finish in the hundreds. When watching it and seeing some of my picks and how wrong they were, it's so tough. So, I don't blame any of those guys for missing on anybody, but it is nice to finally have the roster set here.
Yep, absolutely. And I've also got our Sleeper Wire prophet, Hus. What's going on?
What's up, man? I mean, Justin, you didn't know Denzel Ward was going to go 4th overall? I mean, a little disappointed. You're always on it. You're always correct.
I had him 5th. I had him going 5th to the Broncos. Come on.
Wow.
Yeah, Chubb going to the Browns.
I had the Browns trading out. But anyway, we just talked about how we don't want to go over mock drafts anymore. It's dead.
That's true. That is true. So let's go ahead and jump into the show here. All right, so as usual, we're going to begin with our quick question and a little bit of news here. Big news, which basically broke right after we recorded our first show this week. Mark Ingram was suspended for 4 games for violating the NFL's performance-enhancing drug policy. He has already appealed. They've already heard the appeal, and they've already denied it. So it's looking like this is going to stick. That said, is Alvin Kamara now worth taking as the 5th running back off the board, like he's been going anyway?
I think absolutely. I think absolutely. I've had Kamara really high through the whole process here. I really like what we saw last year. He's a phenomenal talent. The Saints love him. They gave him more work as the year went on. They definitely need someone else there. So I think in the time that Ingram's going to miss, they're going to work somebody else in there. I kind of think it's going to be Jonathan Williams. It might be Boston Scott. But they're going to have somebody else mix in with him. They're not just going to give him 30 touches a game or more. That would be insane, especially for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. You don't work your running back completely into exhaustion in the first month of the season. So they'll be smart about it. But his value, even with Ingram there, his value, I think, deserves to be in the top 5 or 6. Phenomenal talent. And we went into last year worried about, Mark Ingram, and does Sean Payton actually like Mark Ingram? Is he going to completely force him out of town? This might be the newest step, and, he might just look at Mark Ingram and be upset about this, and we might see even less of Mark Ingram. I kind of thought that was going to happen anyway. I thought the shift was going to go more to, a 70%, 30% kind of thing, or something a little more towards Kamara, as much as he can handle without losing any of his explosiveness. So I think it's great news for him, for a player that already was establishing himself as the 1A or the complete lead guy in that backfield. I think it's really good news for anyone who's excited about Kamara. And if you're an Ingram owner, I feel bad for you, but you had to have seen the writing on the wall last year, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Hus, what about you? Is he worth taking as the 5th overall running back?
I mean, sure. If you want to take him there, you're going to have to take him there because I mean, he's going to be taken. I mean, regardless, some people might take him first overall now with this hype. I don't see him getting a full load, as Justin was alluding to. I mean, that's a bad recipe for the dude getting injured. I mean, and he's your star running back of the future. I don't think you want to do that. Definitely, I'm a little bit higher on Boston Scott than maybe a few others, but I mean, definitely see Boston Scott playing a role. I mean, look, Kamaro's already seen 58% versus 49, including the playoffs. You know, that's over the last course of the 8 weeks. So, yeah, he's going to see more work, but I mean, how much more work can he see? 5 to 6 more touches? I don't see him seeing much more than that. They got to keep the guy upright. So if you want to take him, you know, sure. You know, I usually trade out of the first round just because there's so many busts that are there every year. So I like to trade out of the first round and just, you know, get a couple second rounders, third rounders. I do it every year. It's amazing. And, you know, I find myself, you know, in a couple championships, but if that's what I'm doing in that league. So, yeah, I mean, you can see Kamara going, I see as high as first overall. I wouldn't be surprised.
And that'll be interesting to see if people sort of overvalue him now. I think top 5, top 6 makes complete sense. I think we saw him do it last year. So unless you're going to be able to make an argument that he's going to take a step back, and I get it, you know, efficiency, he was phenomenal, you know, maybe. But now with this Ingram news, he's really going to have a chance to put a stranglehold on that backfield. I still think Ingram's going to come back and have a decent role. I'm not saying he's going to come back and he's going to be on the bench completely, but I think he will lose a few touches a game. And just with a few touches a game, that could allow Kamara to overcome some of the, you know, regression that might be coming for him this year with just a few touches a game. So I'm curious to know what the real reason anyone would think that he should be lower than that. I know you guys had my good friend Jake Seeley on, and Seeley was extremely low on Kamara. But obviously before this news, I'm guessing that it probably changed a little after this news. But yeah, I'm interested to see, just looking at him from a talent perspective, he's one of the most talented backs I think we've seen come out in a little while here. So I'm really excited about him this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would have him ranked 5th. I know that that's where you have him. I was looking at your rankings earlier today, and you have him ranked 5th in a PPR. I still think I like Melvin Gordon a little bit more than him. I had Kamara really going in the second round. I didn't think it was worth a first round pick. Now I do, but I still think I'd take Gordon over.
Just
and that's fair.
Workload, I guess. Yeah,
that's
fair.
Yep.
I mean, I think those are both going to be really good offenses. I like Gordon a lot this year as well. You know, I think the Chargers are a team that could make a big jump this year. You know, that defense looks phenomenal. And that's kind of what we saw from the Saints last year. Their defense stepped up, and it allowed them to now have the strong running game and play that off of their strong defense. I think we're going to see that from the Chargers this year too. They have so many pieces, and adding Derwin James, and that defense is going to be really strong. And I think they're going to give Gordon a lot of runway because Phillip Rivers just keeps getting older here, and he's still a quality talent, and they got a lot of receiving weapons. But if they can win games easy through the running game, I think they're going to do it.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for our not so quick question at the beginning of the show.
It never is, right?
Let's go ahead and get into the news. And no, it never is. Well, we don't have a whole lot of fantasy relevant news here, but we have like a tiny bit, and we've got some coach speak as well. But starting off with a tiny bit of news, the Eagles signed running back Matt Jones, who was just released by the Colts. He won a workout between 3 running backs on Tuesday. Terrence West also visited the Eagles on Tuesday. Justin, was he one of the other running backs that Matt Jones was competing with?
I didn't even know that Terrence West had visited. I didn't see that piece of news today. I'm not really concerned about either of those guys, though. I hope that we're not going to see some sort of situation in Philadelphia where they're trotting out 5 or 6 running backs here and trying to use a massive committee. I think they're going to be smart this year. I think they're going to lead with Ajayi. I think the days of, you know, Matt Jones and even Terrence West, I don't think we're going to see any more fantasy relevant days for either of those guys.
Yeah, if Matt Jones beat Terrence West, how bad is Terrence West right now?
Exactly.
If Matt Jones beat him out.
Exactly.
Well, even more, I mean, I think just the whole them going after any of these guys, a little bit of a head scratcher. They re-signed Sproles. No, I mean, he's old. Maybe it was just because he's, you know, they wanted to keep a guy. He's kind of like a statue, right? He's been around that long. You want to keep him around. Maybe he's a good luck thing or something. But they still got Corey Clement. They brought in, I like Corey Clement. I didn't think they needed to add anything much. But this to me kind of speaks the hate for Ajayi, I think, that Chris has. And this makes me kind of like, I don't know if I like Ajayi as much. I mean, I know they needed something. They didn't add anything in the draft, but Doug Peterson is a tough cookie. He's tough to read, and he lies all the time, and he doesn't like to use too many guys. I mean, he's like a Bill Belichick kind of, so I don't know. I mean, this for me, I was not already high on Ajayi this year as I was last year, given, a whole different situation. But yeah, this hurts Ajayi, I think. Not hurts him, but I'm not as high on, even I wasn't already, but I'm not kind of knocking him down a little bit more.
Yeah, and when it comes to Matt Jones being there, I mean, the Eagles really didn't have early down back aside from Jay Ajayi, because Corey Kmet is better in the passing game. He can run a little bit too, but he's better in the passing game. Darren Sproles is certainly the third down back. So they just didn't have a guy who could do the early down work there.
Yeah, I think that's really what it speaks to, a Wendell Smallwood. Like, are you really going to trust any of those other running backs that they had with early down work? I think this is just going to be a depth move, and I wouldn't even be shocked if Matt Jones gets cut along the way here. I believe it was a 2-year deal, so he'll probably stick around, but I wouldn't be shocked if we see him let go in camp if somebody else steps up.
Yep. Speaking of players being let go, I think we spent enough time on Matt Jones. The Chiefs waived running back Akeem Hunt due to a failed physical. This is really one of the 6 guys that they had that they needed to cut at least 2 and most likely 3 of them. I thought it was going to be Akeem Hunt and the Williams brothers. Not technically brothers, but Damian and Kerwin. I think those guys, at least one of them is going to get cut as well.
Yeah, it's going to have to shape up that way. I mean, it's pretty clear who the top 2 guys are there. And they brought in so many backs. Every time they were adding somebody, it was shocking. It was like, what? Shouldn't they be paying attention to other positions here or their defense where they've lost so much? I think they brought in a lot of guys and had to make a decision, and they must not have been very happy with Akeem Hunt, and we didn't see much from him in the chances that he got in the last year. He had a role there for a little while with West out and everything. So, he was able to get on the field and didn't really show much. So this isn't that surprising.
Yeah. And with Ware now, I mean, I think this kind of more spoke to support. I think it kind of more was speaking towards Ware, because it was surprising that they would let him go, and Ware he wasn't that healthy, but maybe he is. Maybe he is going to be more healthy. I was kind of surprised at it, and at first my jaw dropped for a second because I thought it said Kareem Hunt for a second. I was like, Hunt, what? But yeah, obviously it was Akeem Hunt. They would never do that. That would be crazy.
The classic move, like when the Adrian Peterson Chicago Bears player gets picked in a draft and everyone was shocked back in the day.
Or everybody took David Johnson from the Steelers.
Exactly.
All right, moving on here. Brandon Marshall is visiting the Seattle Seahawks. He probably visited them by the time you hear the show. Right. They really need someone because it's really just Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett back there. So they just need to add someone. He's going to be super cheap. The Eagles signed their second-round pick, tight end Dallas. Is it Goddard? I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Or Goddard. Yeah, Dallas Goddard to a 4-year contract. And I believe they're the first team to sign all of their draft picks.
Well, they want to move on,
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at Brandon Marshall there, I think Marshall's career is pretty close to the end. I don't think he's that interesting of a signing at this point for anyone, even a team like the Seahawks that could really use some help in that area. I think that's a team that could be exciting for Dez. We haven't seen really anyone connected to Dez here. We saw him saying that he wants to go to somebody in the NFC East, and the NFC East kind of turning their backs to him. So he's going to end up somewhere. I think Dez would be a nice signing for the Seahawks and a spot maybe that he could actually step up and do something still, even though, he has probably lost a step or two and separation isn't really his forte anymore. But Brandon Marshall is a name and a guy that if he does end up in Seattle is going to get overdrafted in fantasy because people are still going to see that name. They're going to see Russell Wilson and they're going to think that he can do something. And I'm here to tell you right now that he will not. We saw the last of it for the Giants. And aside from a couple, practice plays where they put it up on Instagram or something where it was exciting that he caught a touchdown, once we got into the live action, there was not much left in the tank there.
And the thing is crazy about Brandon Marshall. I mean, I was telling people, the Giants fan, and I had to watch them just because my heart is attached to them. But I was like, man, it's terrible. The guy hasn't caught a ball. He's going to be a bust for you. And he, in fact, he didn't catch a ball from Eli. I think he caught one ball in the offseason. Now, granted, he was banged up at one point, and then game started, and I think he did catch that one touchdown, and then that was that. But yeah, Brandon Marshall, I think this is good for Doug Baldwin. Chris asked me the show before with Jake Seeley, who's the early draft risers. I don't know why. I just said Matt Breida. Even I was looking up his numbers, and I did kind of like Matt Breida. But I think Doug Baldwin, if I could switch my answer a show later, I think Doug Baldwin would be the guy. Because if they can add a guy like Brandon Marshall, and they didn't add much in the draft, I like Doug Baldwin this year versus last year. I wasn't as high on him, and his number showed he wasn't counted on that much.
All right. Moving on here. Last little bit of news. Orleans Darkwa had a minor surgery on Wednesday to remove a plate in his leg that was put in there last offseason. The doctor said that the fracture had healed, so he should be good to go in 4 weeks, but not really a threat to Saquon Barkley at all. So let's go ahead and get into a little bit of coach speak. And I put this one in here in particular because I knew you would want to talk about this guy who's Greg Allman of the Tampa Bay Times expects Peyton Barber and second-round pick Ronald Jones to initially share the load in the Buccaneers backfield. And before I pass this off to you, I just want to say, I'm not a Peyton Barber fan. I don't think he's going to be the starter. I've said that. It just seems like 4 straight shows, right? Because you always bring him up.
I know, it's my fault.
This is not a surprise. I expected this as well. They're not just going to hand the keys to the kingdom to the rookie right off the bat. Of course they're going to share the load week 1.
I mean, come on. You were so down on him that you would have probably said it's not going to be him. It's going to be who the frick is the other guy? That's
Jaquiz Rogers.
Jaquiz Rogers here. Jaquiz Rogers. His name escaped me. I don't know why. Wait, I do. I mean, I love Peyton Barber. I didn't see him starting. I never said he's going to – I guess I did say he was going to start. But he's going to share the load. This is what I've always felt. I think he's still going to get most of the carries because he's a bigger guy. I think he's a better blocker. And the OC over there, he likes his running backs to block for his coach. For his quarterback. I mean – this is why they drafted another, this is why they signed Cameron Brate and they still have O.J. Howard out there. They like guys to help block their quarterbacks. So this is the whole reason why I like Peyton Barber. And he looked good last year. I mean, he had 100 yards against Green Bay and he had that team on his back. He carried them to overtime victory. He's the only guy in the Bucs uniform that was able to do that last year. You can't just write that off and relegate him as he sucks, or someone said he was a journeyman on Sleeper Bot. I was like, dude, it's his 3rd season. It's called the breakout. Give him opportunities. He's going to do things for you. And I'm sorry, I'm just not a big Ronald Jones fan. I mean, the guy has work to do. Maybe next year.
Peyton Barber sucks. What about you, Justin?
I mean, it doesn't make for good podcast having everybody agree, but I really agree here that I think I saw this coming as well. I thought that this was going to be a timeshare. Nice. I didn't think that they were I know they spent a lot of draft capital to get Ronald Jones, and that was really the only thing that was pushing him up in my rankings, and he's still going to be ranked above Peyton Barber. He's still going to be the better running back of the two. But, I mean, the NFL is such a copycat league, right? We see Zeke get drafted early. We see Fournette get drafted early, and it sort of leads to Saquon getting drafted early. Well, guess what? Look around the league right now. Who had success last year? Just in their division, it was the Ingram-Kamara combo. And I think that's what this is the poorest of poor man's Ingram-Kamara combo. But I think that's what they're going for here. I think they are going to have Barber be the bigger back there that can take some of the carries. There is no way that Ronald Jones would be able to stand up to NFL punishment for 16 games if he was getting 20-plus carries a game. There are few backs who can at this point. So I didn't think that was ever going to happen. I still think he has a chance to be really good. I still think he's an RB3 right now, and if he proves us all wrong and shows even more than we think he has, there's a chance for him to make it into the RB2 ranks for fantasy. But I think the timeshare makes a lot of sense, both from their perspective and projecting it. And I think that Ronald Jones is going to be more of an RB3 flex kind of player because I do think Barber is going to cap a lot of his value.
Who do you have ranked higher right?
I have Jones ranked higher. I think Jones is going to get more touches. I don't have any doubt about that, but I never thought from the moment they drafted him that he was just going to step into this lead back role and take over that backfield. I thought that they were going to work someone else in, and I kind of still like Peyton Barber. I actually don't mind if you have him in that role. If you're not asking him to be your 20, 25, carry a game or touch a game guy, if you're just bringing him in and having him be sort of that, like I said, that poor man's Mark Ingram that can back up the more explosive back and can be your hammer, I think he could do fine in a role like that.
They should go with Jaquiz.
I love him. Leave him alone, man. Jaquiz is great.
Jaquiz over 2 or 3 games, Jaquiz Rogers is actually shockingly a guy who can step in and do that 20, 25 carry thing, but no more than that. You can't but he is great to have on your bench because he could show up at any moment and put up 20, 25.
I mean, I'll right before we move on to Peyton Barber, because I know we've been spending a lot of time. They had a terrible line last year. They had this guy, that guy. They had a makeshift line, and Peyton Barber still was the only guy to get it done. Not Doug Martin, not Jaquiz Rogers, none of these guys. He's entering his 3rd year. He knows the offense. Why would they just relegate him even though he was an undrafted guy? Give me a guy that has a chip on his shoulder to prove everybody wrong. I don't know, there's some Hall of Famer guys that not to say he's a Hall of Famer, but there's guys that go undrafted and they turn out to do amazing things, So I like Peyton Barber a lot. It's his 3rd year in the offense. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people.
Wait, how many years in the offense? I don't think you said it enough. Say it one more time for our listeners.
Okay.
All right. Let's move on here. Zach Kiefer of the Indianapolis Star believes that Chester Rogers is the leading candidate to be the Colts wide receiver 2, after T.Y. Hilton, of course. I'm not really surprised at this. I think it's going to be a battle between him and Ryan Grant, but Chester Rogers has been there for a couple seasons, so he knows the offense a little bit better. So I wouldn't be surprised if he at least started as the wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I mean, I have these guys ranked really, really low. I think it's still, we're going to have to see in OTAs and in training camp who comes out ahead and who wins this job. I think Ryan Grant's the better receiver there. Seeing them sort of back up the incumbent guy isn't that shocking at this point in the year. Really, that whole Colts receiver core is just wide open behind T.Y.
Right.
Anything could happen. It could fall in any order. They could add a Dez Bryant or something, really, if you want to look at teams that could add Dez. So, I'm not putting too much stock into this one. I think the craziest part of the thing that needs to be discussed the most here is that we still aren't seeing Andrew Luck throw a football. And if Andrew Luck doesn't get back to full health, none of this matters for fantasy. I don't even know that I'd want to touch T.Y. this year. So, that's really the main thing we should be watching. And every single beat writer in Indy should be camped out outside of Andrew Luck's house trying to find any tidbit of information. I want to see him throwing garbage in the trash. I want to see him throwing anything right now because that's what we need to know. Right now I have Ryan Grant and Chester Rogers ranked so low, so far off of the radar. But if one of them can step up and Luck is healthy, I'm going to bump that person up significantly. So I still think it's going to be Ryan Grant, but I don't know that there's going to be that much value here. We got excited about other guys in the past like this, Kamar Aiken and stuff, and they never really materialized. So I don't know that we need to worry too much about it. I think we do need to worry about whether Luck's going to be healthy or not.
To be fair, Kamar Aiken was a 1-year deal, and that was with Brissett.
True.
Yeah. So you can't hold that against him.
Kamar Aiken defender here. Sounds like someone who owns Kamar Aiken in a dynasty.
I do.
No, he's a Colts fan. That's what it is. He's a Colts fan. So there's the defense of this. But I mean, Chris, you have to be happy. I don't hear you talking about these guys with Deion Kane and Dory Fountain. I think those are the guys that's going to overshoot these other guys. I mean, especially Fountain. He had 13 touchdowns last year. I think he could be the guy that replaces a lot of Moncrief. If Luck does come back, he should be the guy to replace that touchdown.
He very well could be. Very well could be. All right, let's go ahead and talk about some of your rankings that we have here, Justin. And I'm going to start off by talking about the fact that you have been in the top 10 in Fantasy Pro's most accurate expert competition 5 of the last 6 years. So what does it take to be able to pull that off?
It takes a lot of hours. It takes a very understanding wife. A lot of nights where there are plans being made where, the decision's made. I got to work on the rankings. I got to go over some more stuff. So she has been great through this time. We were dating and engaged and now married, and she is extremely, extremely understanding with this stuff. The process for me really starts this time of year. I keep backing it up. But you have to start at the draft at this time, just going over everything. Your projections have to be put together. I started on those well before the draft and then updated them when, the players were picked. Just going over that stuff, going over the research so much. Every year I try to add one more sort of new element that's going to, help me improve. I never just want to be stagnant and go into the next season, with the same process. So last year I was waking up at 4 a.m. on Sundays and taking that 3 or 4 hours where everyone's sleeping in my house and elsewhere in the world and going over the rankings. I was the first one to, sort of jump on the Schefter Rappaport news that always breaks Sunday mornings. And, that felt like that gave me a bit of an edge. So it's just trying to find any little edge like that. I also think that a big thing for me is not putting too much stock in just what I saw last year or in season what I saw last week. I think too often fantasy owners are just convinced they're just convinced that, what they saw last week is just how it's going to be now. And that, last week so-and-so threw for 5 touchdowns and, oh my God, now he's the best quarterback in the league. And they overrank people like that. And, I think that's really important to kind of bring yourself back, center it, remember, okay, wait a minute, clean slate. Where is everything? It's like playing roulette, right? When, it's red 10 times, so you assume it's got to be black this time. Well, no, the odds are reset every single time. You got to come at it from a blank slate, right?
Yep, so it's called the gambler's fallacy.
Exactly. So I think that's been really helpful for me, being able to sort of go back to that blank slate and go over and trust my research and trust, my process that I'm going to be able to, get myself back in there. And to be honest, I will be honest with you, the first time I did it, I expected that I, wasn't going to be anywhere near the top 10, and I got in there. The next year I thought, okay, this is going to be the year I'm going to be proven to be a fraud, right? They're going to get me. And I was back in there. And each year go into it going, is this the year that I'm going to come in last, that it's all going to fall apart? So maybe that helps motivate me too, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So from what I got from that was understanding wife. So
yeah. Do you still get the eye sometimes when you have to cancel a plan?
Yes, I do. I definitely do. From everyone in my life, actually. Yeah. But I think they understand now. I think even at my wedding, my best man speech sort of touched on a lot of the fantasy stuff and kind of, took some shots at me for that. So he actually decided to name off everyone that had beaten me in this contest over the last 6 or 4 years before that as part of his speech, which I thought was great.
That is awesome. Well, speaking of people beating you, what was your highest finish?
A couple years back, I was first for most of the year, and not that we need to bring up terrible, terrible things, but I had my bachelor party in Miami that year, went away for the weekend, and after that weekend, I lost first place and never got it back the rest of the year.
Damn.
Third.
So you partied like Odell. And
yeah, it was my Rocky III moment where I thought, I'm doing so well. Fine, I can, So yeah, I ended up coming in third that year, which was my highest finish. But it definitely was still a disappointing year in a weird way. I finished fourth last year though, so I've gotten a couple trophies out of it. Fantasy Pros puts together these really nice trophies for the top 5, and so that's been great. It's that's been a very nice sort of add-on that I never expected.
Do you have a rival, just someone that he beats you every year?
I would say when I first started, it was John Paulson from 4 for 4. He sort of had
he was killing it.
It's been Sean Kroenig, the director of analytics at Stats Inc. He's won it 3 years in a row. I can't believe it. It keeps me up at night still thinking about that. Yeah, I would say he's probably the one right now that we're all aiming to take down.
Well, we had Pat Fitzmaurice on the show, and he said the same exact thing because he finished second last year. And he's like, he's a machine. We're convinced, he has to be.
He's got some life cheat code here that we don't know.
All right, let's get into talking about some of your rankings here. So we're going to kick it off with Dynasty, and we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this. Your Dynasty rankings, I just want to ask you really just one question about these. So your top 15, we've got Saquon Barkley, Sony Michel, Darius Geis, Nick Chubb at 4, Rashad Penny at 5, DJ Moore, your first wide receiver, at 6, Ronald Jones 7, Royce Freeman 8, Calvin Ridley 9, Kerryon Johnson, Christian Kirk, and Cortland Sutton round out the top 12, and then you've got Michael Gallup, Anthony Miller, and James Washington. So here's my question to you. It seems that in past years, the best wide receivers are being taken earlier in the first round. Is it strange to only have 2 wide receivers in the top 10 picks?
It definitely is strange. I mean, last year, even with the quality running backs that came out, I still thought Corey Davis was the top pick. That's the guy I wanted. I still think he's going to end up having a really good career. But it's extremely strange, and I think it just boils down to it's a bad year for wide receivers. As much as we spend the draft time, the months leading up to it, talking about all of the players, and, there are going to be some guys that show up in this class. But we saw last year, there's no guarantees. Mike Williams went to the Chargers. He could still have a good career, but, really had a lost rookie season. John Ross, another top 10 pick, really didn't do much in his rookie season. And we'll see. Like I said, there's still a long way to go for those guys in their careers. But I think that shows that there are no guarantees just because someone's taken high, just because someone's a first-round pick, that they're going to materialize. And looking at these guys before the draft, I wasn't overly excited. There wasn't that talent that just blew me away. Some people thought it was Calvin Ridley. Right. I definitely do not. I don't see the athletic profile from him that I really want to see from a guy that I would be blown away by. And now that he's going to be playing in a situation where he's behind Julio Jones, so he's not going to get the most targets on that team. And he's playing with a pretty quality veteran in Mohamed Sanu that I know people have probably, just sort of put him down, but Sanu's a legitimate veteran that is going to make it hard for Ridley, I think, in early in his career anyway. So, and DJ Moore is the guy that I think has the best chance this year to show up. And I still think there's a lot of potential in that Panthers offense. And I think with Greg Olsen getting a little bit older, with Funchess being a good player, but not somebody that's, not a Julio Jones type guy that's going to definitely command the most targets on that team, I think it's possible for DJ Moore to step in there and as the year goes on, really start to take charge of that receiving core. So I think that those two are definitely the most talented. I like Christian Kirk in Dynasty moving forward, when Larry steps out of the way. But, there's a lot of problems in that offense still. Their offensive line is a serious issue that they're going to have to address. So right. I think it really speaks to the talent of this running back class and a bit of a bad year for receivers.
Yeah, that makes plenty of sense. I mean, I feel like this year, especially with wide receivers, I always liked, and I don't know your own personal draft strategy, but I love to just get the guys that, in redrafts that I know I can count on. I don't like to take the guys that may work out, may not work out. I like the guys I can leave in my lineup, and then I draft one running back should be a stud, and then, the rest of it. I just feel like wide receivers are a little bit harder to crack. I mean, there's so many, the guy has to have targets, and he has to catch the ball, and the quarterback it's a lot that goes into it. Whereas a running back, if he gets handed the ball, chances are you could just count his opportunities and then bank on that as far as production. So I definitely agree with you as you alluded that it's kind of a tough position to crack, especially in Dynasty.
I'll also add too that it might speak a little bit to my Dynasty strategy, which is probably a little shorter term. I look at it more like a 3-year window. So that really puts quality running backs a little bit higher in the rookie drafts because I think that's when they're going to come in and really produce versus the receivers. It's going to take a little bit longer. For anybody out there who's doing like a startup though, my favorite strategy in a startup is to get quality receivers in that startup draft that are young, that are guys. For example, the Fantasy Pros, they had a Dynasty League they started up last year. And I went out and got Amari Cooper, Michael Thomas, and I got Devontae Adams, all with fairly early picks. Those guys are all really young. They're going to be quality receivers for a long time, barring injury. Whereas running back's a position where you're probably going to cycle through those guys a lot during those guys' careers, right? So that might be a little bit that might explain a little bit as well why receivers, if I don't think that they're going to be a star talent, if I'm not really confident in that, then they're going to be a little bit lower down my draft board.
I like it. Let's go ahead and get into your regular rankings here. And we're going to go position by position. And there's only one quarterback I want to talk about. Everyone was super excited about Case Keenum being the starter in Denver after his good season last year. But if everyone was so excited, why does everyone still have him ranked in the 20s? You've got him at 22.
So let me get this straight. Of all the quarterbacks that are ranked, the guy you want to talk about is Case Keenum. I just want to.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Okay.
I want to know. Well, because I loved, I agreed with all the rest of them.
Okay.
That's why this one stood out to me, because there was such hype about, he's going to Denver, he's going to be great. But I still only see him being ranked in the 20s, and I haven't had a chance to ask any other analyst about that. When
you're looking at some of the guys that are ranked lower, I think it speaks to how many great quarterback options there are. That's just, if you're in a single quarterback league, if you're not playing in a 2-quarterback league or a super flex, you should 100% be waiting at this point. There are so many quality guys that you can get at the very end of your draft. Guys with upside, guys like Patrick Mahomes. And I would even say a guy like Case Keenum fits that bill. Now, he's lower just based on the fact that there are so many other guys that I like more, but Keenum's a guy who could step up. I think, looking at Keenum, he has a chance to perform well. He has really good receivers, obviously, there, and the Broncos did a smart thing by sort of drafting the Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders replacements as well. So even if one of those guys goes down, they're going to have somebody else who can step up. So I think that's a positive. I think they've improved their offensive line. I think a lot of things about that offense are solid, but I think Keenum is a guy that has a ceiling. We're not talking about an elite talent here. We're talking about a guy who in the right situation can produce. And Minnesota last year was a phenomenal situation where he was surrounded by talent everywhere. And I think Denver's going to be a good situation for him. I don't think it's going to be as good as Minnesota last year because I think Thomas and Sanders are a little further on in their careers that, they're not quite where they were before. But I think Keenum is going to have a decent season. He's going to be a guy that I'm going to target when I'm streaming quarterbacks. I'm going to be all over Keenum when he has a good matchup. But I don't see how much higher I can move him when you're looking at the names on the list ahead of him.
Yeah, and I think to be fair, quarterback is a position where it's a couple points as far as on average that, you're bumping a guy up from 22 to 15 or from 15 to now 12. It's not a huge gap. I think the huger gap is those top 4 guys, and then everyone else is kind of closer to where you're putting guys from 8 to 16 even. It's not that huge of a gap as far as points that they're giving you on a game-to-game basis, and you can kind of put anyone in there. You can say anyone is going to be a top. Matt Ryan, he's going undrafted. Matt Ryan could easily, maybe not easily, but Matt Ryan could be a quarterback 1. I don't know where you have him right now, but it's he could, even Keenum, he can change. This is all about situations, and I guess what I was alluding to is that can change in any situation. Quarterback's kind of hard to peg for, in that regard.
Yeah, and just to rattle off some of the names that are above or even below Keenum, 17, Marcus Mariota, Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott. I can't imagine Keenum going ahead of any of those guys. Alex Smith, maybe. I think they're still going to, lean in the passing game quite a bit. I think Smith he's a guy that with the running ability, he always kind of sneaks into that top 20 and ends up in that 18, 19 range. Even though when you watch him, last year was a little bit different, but normally when you watch Alex Smith, you're not overly excited. Blake Bortles, another guy like that with the rushing ability who sort of doesn't look great on the field, but often fantasy-wise ends up a little higher. And even below Keenum, looking at, Derek Carr's a guy who, if Gruden comes in, that offense should be better. I know everyone makes fun of Gruden, but let's look at the coaching staff they had last year. That was a huge problem. Their offense just got driven right into the ground. They're going to be better than last year. I think Carr's a guy who could even jump Keenum. And Trubisky is right behind Carr. And Trubisky's a guy now who has a better offensive mind there, who has some weapons that were brought in around him. I think Trubisky's a guy who is, when I'm talking about, the Patrick Mahomes, or I mentioned Keenum before as a guy, or Carr, Trubisky, those are guys that could really have, big seasons, despite being down in the 20s. So it just all comes back to how many quarterbacks there are that are startable in fantasy, which is why I definitely recommend 2 quarterback leagues. I think that's very important at this point for the quality of the league.
So you don't think Case Keenum will repeat his being the QB 14 again?
I don't think so. I do. Okay. Just simple answer. No, I don't think that he's going to get that high on the list.
For the record, I don't disagree with you. I was just curious. I wanted to throw that out there. All right, let's move to running backs here. So I have Melvin Gordon as my RB5. Why do you have him behind Kareem Hunt?
We touched on Gordon a little bit earlier.
And I seem super pumped about him. So I want to know how excited you are about Kareem Hunt this year.
I think with Hunt, the big thing is how I think their defense is going to be a lot worse this year. They lost some pieces there. And I think the way the Chiefs win games is going to change. At first, I don't think they're going to win as many games, but I think the way they win games is going to change. Now you bring in Patrick Mahomes. I don't see Mahomes as a guy that's going to check down all the time. Mahomes is going to throw downfield, and they've given him weapons to do that. So I think the check downs are going to drop a little bit when it comes to, Kareem Hunt. I think Spencer Ware being healthy now is going to be a problem. I think they're going to play him a little more than maybe people expect. Let me preface all of this, though, by saying that I still have Kareem Hunt in my top 10. We're not talking about I don't have Kareem Hunt in the 20s or something like that. So we're kind of splitting hairs a little bit, but those are reasons that I have a little bit of concern. The defense not being as strong, them not being able to, win games and just sort of lean on the run at the end of games, and the offense being more willing to throw downfield, which I think Mahomes can definitely do, and I think bringing in Sammy Watkins to pair with Tyreek Hill, and obviously Kelsey's one of the best tight ends in the league. I think the offense is going to win like that, or at least move the ball like that, and they're going to be trailing in a few more games this year. So that gives me a little bit of doubt when it comes to Hunt, whereas with Gordon, I really think the Chargers are going to take a step this year. I think they are positioned to be a really, really good team, and I think they're going to be able to lead on the run with an older quarterback. So I think Gordon's going to have another solid season, obviously barring injury, which we always have to say with running backs.
Yeah, so should you have Gordon and Hunt flipped? Because you have Hunt higher.
Sorry. You're talking about the PPR, or are you talking about standard rankings?
Oh, I'm talking about PPR. I'm sorry, I should have specified that.
Okay. Well, the other thing too is I haven't published my new rankings since the Ingram stuff happened. So I've done these rankings. The ones you're looking at are probably from about a week or so ago.
Yeah, it says 9 days.
Okay, so I haven't published my latest one, so we might be looking at slightly different things here. But once again, that speaks to the fact that we're just splitting hairs here, right? We're talking about guys who, we're talking about 7 and 8 or, 7 to 9 or something like that. They're both going to be RB1s. I just think there's a better chance that Gordon could put up a top 5 season, let's say, this year, than there is of Hunt sort of, producing another big year like he had last year.
And
so
Justin,
you did move Kareem Hunt back.
I did Kareem Hunt back, yes.
Okay, that's what I was getting at, because you were so pumped about Gordon. But apparently 9 days ago you felt differently. All right,
this is all a ploy for Professor Chris to talk badly about Kareem Hunt, because he knows I love Kareem Hunt and he loves Melvin Gordon, but Austin Eckler is there, and then they just drafted Justin Jackson, who I think could take away from him, and Eckler definitely is going to take away from on the passing downs. So I think that Justin wanted to, maybe he didn't move him. Maybe he's, I'm going to convince him to keep him where he is, because they added pieces. I mean, who did the Chiefs add? I mean, Damian Williams, I think,
I think Spencer Ware coming back is the big one there. But this also makes me consider, I have Barkley a little bit lower.
I do as well.
Yeah. I still have him in my top 10. But if we're just looking at touches, who is Barkley really going to lose touches to? I'm not that concerned about Jonathan Stewart. So that's a situation where if you're looking at it just from a workload standpoint, I can understand why some people would put a Saquon Barkley over those guys, because I get it. Austin Eckler definitely got involved last year, and they did draft Jackson. But when I'm looking at, teams that I think are going to win a lot of games this year. And those are the things that I'm going over at this point in the season. The Vegas win totals, like all that sort of stuff. You sort of just keep going through the projections and, another wave with, okay, this time I'm going to go through and I'm going to go over, the Vegas win totals. Next time I'm going to go over something else. That's how it just keeps getting updated week by week at this point in the year.
So last year was the year of the rookie running back. We had 4 rookies finish as RB1s in PPR scoring. Justin, which rookie has the best chance at finishing top 12 aside from Saquon Barkley?
I am so excited to say this. It is Sony Michel.
Ooh.
It is Sony Michel. It is Sony Michel.
Love it.
Okay, the Patriots completely showed their hand on this one. And I know people talked about, Evan Silva sort of sniffing out the whole thing about, maybe Belichick's guys in the media put out there some of the stuff about Michel's injury history or whatever. I think Michel getting picked in the first round by a team like the Patriots that are a win now team, that are a team that just lost a guy that does a lot of what he does. They just lost Dion Lewis, who's a very similar player to Sony Michel in a lot of ways. So I think he slots right into that role. And if he shows that he can really perform well, I think he is going to have people made the comparison. I think he's going to have a Kareem or Alvin Kamara-like season. You got me talking about Kareem Hunt so much, I almost said Kareem Hunt. But not far off from that, Kareem Hunt did have a big rookie year as well. So I think Michel's going to step in. I think the Patriots, that backfield, I think it's really going to be Sony Michel and Rex Burkhead. I know James White in the past has been involved a lot, but last year when Burkhead was healthy, Burkhead really stepped up and took that receiving role. And Michel's a guy who he didn't do too much in the passing game in college, but he has those skills. The only worry with him is that he fumbled a lot in college. Now, mostly came in one season, but he did fumble a lot in college. So if he puts the ball on the ground a few times early in the year, this could derail the whole thing. That is possible. But
deflated footballs are easier to not fumble.
Yeah, I love Sony.
If we're just looking for someone who is going to come in and is going to produce in, both facets of the game, that he's going to be able to, be a runner and a receiver and score a lot of touchdowns. The Patriots have leaned on that running game a lot. I know Brady throws and we see the big stats, but that's because their offense is so successful. Their running game has produced over 1,800 yards the last 2 years, and they get a lot of touchdowns on the ground. So Sony Michel, in my mind, is going to be the lead back there. Rex Burkhead's going to mix in with him. And if Michel stays healthy, I think a Kamara-like year is definitely in play.
Yep. I said Stephen Ridley, top 10 most weeks. They have Mike Gillicksy, they're paid $3.2, Burkhead $3 million, James White $1 million, then he can earn another $3 million in incentives. Jeremy Hill, kind of the same thing. You look at what they're paying. They're not paying him much. He's on a rookie contract. He's only making whatever. But it's just that they don't have to use him like they have to. The other guys, they're insurance purposes. We were talking about Sam Bradford and why they gave him $20 million. You have the money. You have to spend it. So, this is, they bring in other guys. But I love Sony Michel. And I think I had him before. After the first round, I put out early, super early rankings, because nothing else was done. It was just the first round. And I actually had Sony above Barkley. And that's just because purely off the fact that he's in a better offense. He's in an offense where he should be able to score more points. If given opportunity, he should be able to outscore Barkley if given the opportunity. Now, I know that's bold. Probably most people won't even say that. So I kind of moved Barkley ahead, but I kind of want to keep Sony in front of him. I don't know. I just want to keep him. I want to keep him there. I think he has that potential.
All right, and one last running back question here. With the news that Pete Carroll has once again said that Rashad Penny is a 3-down back, what's it going to take to move him up a bit in your rankings?
He is going to have to prove to me that he can play in pass protection at the pro level. That was his fatal flaw looking at him. I think that's going to be a problem for him at the next level here. I think the Seahawks offensive line is going to be a little bit better now. They've added a couple pieces. They got Dwayne Brown, last season, mid-season there. I think that offensive line is going to be a little better, but we know that there are going to be a lot of opportunities where he is going to need to protect the quarterback, and that sometimes can be detrimental for rookie running backs, even talented ones. So I'm going to need to see that before I buy into the whole 3-down role for him. I still think that he's in a really good position. I have him as a borderline RB2. So I do like him this year. And I think they are going to give him the chance based on where they took him. It would be shocking to me if then they trot out Chris Carson or Mike Davis or something. But we saw last year that you can be successful in that offense running the ball, even with how bad their offensive line was, right? Like Carson and Davis had games. They had some good games. Part of that is because when you have a quarterback who can run like Russell Wilson can, it's going to open up some lanes for you. So I think that I'm looking at Penny as a guy who could have a really good season as a 2-down back. If he can prove to me in OTAs and in the preseason especially that he can pass protect, I will definitely move him up.
That's fair.
I like it. Let's go ahead and move to wide receivers. So kicking it off here with Amari Cooper, you've got him ranked at 18, which is about where I've been seeing him ranked. But I see Allen Robinson ranked over him quite a bit. Is it just splitting hairs at this point? Yeah,
this is another one where they're obviously really, really close in the rankings, and they'll probably flip-flop several times before the season perhaps. But, with Crabtree out of the picture, anybody who thinks that Jordy Nelson's going to just step into that Crabtree role, go back and watch Jordy Nelson last year. I know Aaron Rodgers wasn't there, but I think that sort of showed us that Jordy's a lot closer to the end than maybe we realize. He's a lot closer to maybe a Brandon Marshall type situation than he is to, coming back and really having a big year. The addition of Martavis Bryant, I think Bryant's going to be a souped up Seth Roberts. I think he might get a couple more touchdowns. He might get, another 100 yards or something like that on top of what Roberts has done. But Roberts has been a half-decent player in that offense. So I think Bryant's going to just step into that sort of role. And I think with Gruden coming in, Gruden has said as much that they want to run that passing game through Cooper, as they should. And this is a guy that we have seen do it. He has come into the league. He put up 2,000-yard seasons. He took a step back last year. They've said he was injured. He played through injuries. Whatever the reason, I think part of it was just how bad and how predictable that offense was last year. So I think Gruden coming in could help that. And I think Cooper is going to really benefit from Crabtree not being around anymore. He's going to step into being the true number one. There is no one challenging him for that role. And they're going to throw a lot of passes his way. I think his targets are going to go up, and we're going to see him step into, what he should have been last year, what we all sort of expected. He's going to have a transcendent season at some point. I think there's a really good chance that this is the year for him to have, to really take a step forward. Robinson is also in a good spot. I like both of these guys. I'm going to draft them both in a lot of leagues. The Bears offense, though, if we're talking about sort of like the Gordon Hunt thing, if we're looking at who has more question marks when I'm really laying out a pros and cons here, I think Robinson has more. He's coming off an injury. He's joining a new team. We've seen receivers who join new teams. Sometimes they struggle a little bit right away. It's a change to new offense. And even simple things like getting used to, the speed and the spin of a quarterback's throw, that is actually a factor. So, he's playing in an offense with, good offensive mind. Matt Nagy is he's going to improve that offense for sure. A good young quarterback. So he's got a chance here to have a big season. I also like a lot of the pass catchers in Chicago, and I would not be shocked if they spread the ball around a little more than we expect. I think, Anthony Miller's a guy that I think is kind of interesting. They've added a lot of receivers, like, even a Taylor Gabriel who could step up and do some things. Trey Burton, Tariq Cohen, none of these guys are established stars, but I think we're seeing in the pro game a lot of teams are starting to spread the ball around quite a bit. So I think Robinson's going to lead them. I'm not even remotely going to suggest that he's not going to be their top receiver. These are all things that add a little bit of doubt and maybe bring down his projection a little bit to put a guy like Cooper ahead of him.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that at all. I'm not a fan of Allen Robinson at all. I'm not a fan of people going to new offenses and expected to do amazing things. Like, I'm just not. Like, it rarely happens ever. So I'm just like, when does it usually happen? And it favors the guy going into a new offense, and he's all of a sudden a wide receiver one. Allen Robinson, he kind of reminds me of not Keenan Allen because he's a different player, but the way people viewed him as like, oh, Keenan Allen was actually injured. Allen Robinson was bad. Like, it's not like he was injured. He was just bad. And now he's going to a new team, and people are expecting him to be good. I think he's going to be a bust. I think Anthony Miller might score more. Like, I can't buy into that guy. Everybody, it's a free-for-all. Everybody's new in that offense.
Well, Allen Robinson did tear his MCL, didn't he? Or his ACL.
Yeah, well, he came back and he still was bad.
Okay. All right. Let's move on here. You've got Dez ranked at 30 right now, or at least you did 9 days ago. Where do you have him right now?
I'm holding him at 30. That's a spot where, he's kind of outside the really important fantasy players. It's a holding ground. We're keeping him at 30, and we're going to find out where he goes.
Why don't you give me one team where him going would bring you above 30?
I mentioned before the Seahawks. I think Russell Wilson could make a lot of people play above their game. I think a guy like Jimmy Graham, who is in the decline right now, Russell Wilson made him extremely valuable last year just by all the touchdowns. I think Dez could go to Seattle and be that kind of guy for them. I think he could be the red zone threat that offense could really, really use. I don't know. It's weird that we haven't heard, like I said earlier, it's weird that we haven't heard a whole bunch of teams attached to him. And I get it. Like, he's not the same player. And he's a guy that brings a lot of baggage, a lot. Are you worried if you're a team with a young quarterback, do you really want Dez to come in and, yell at your quarterback on the sidelines and sort of, break his confidence maybe? So you need a strong team. And that's why another team, because I said the Seahawks earlier, I'll give you another team. It's the Bills. I know they're never going to do it. And I'm saying that partially as a Bills fan, but man, they could use somebody. That's the kind of team where Dez could go there and get what he wants, which is to still be a number one receiver. Very few teams are going to offer him that, and he'd probably be foolish to take it because I think he fits a lot better as a number two. He would be much better if he could get a job somewhere as I know he wants, even like a team like the Texans, I can't imagine them going after him. I think their team's solid without him. But if he could find a team that has a solid offense where he could sort of play a number two role, that would be better for him. And I think Seattle would be a perfect spot with Baldwin being the main guy there, having a ton of chemistry with Russell Wilson. Dez could kind of slot in and take over a lot of the red zone production that Jimmy Graham left behind.
There was a piece of news that came out about a week ago. Hoos, you probably saw it on SleeperBot, where they said way more teams were not interested in signing Dez Bryant than were.
And it's not that surprising. Like, it's surprising from the standpoint. I think the casual fan's going to look at that and go, "Oh my God, it's Dez Bryant." They're still going to, think, and like I talked about earlier, they're going to look back to years past. They're going to associate that, and think of his fantasy production in years past. But he's definitely going to find a job, and he's probably going to end up moving up on that list depending where he goes. I doubt that he's going to go anywhere that's going to drop him too significantly, in part because I think he's going to sign somewhere where he's going to get to play. I don't think he's going to, knowing his personality, I don't think he's going to go somewhere and take a complete back seat. So I could see him moving up at least a few spots, maybe to the mid-20s.
All right. I like it. Last wide receiver here. You've got Robbie Anderson at 42 right now. And I don't know if this is just a placeholder as well, because we don't know if he's going to be suspended or not suspended or in jail or a free man. If he's playing and isn't suspended, or even if it's just 2 games, will he move up from 42, or do you have him locked there?
He will move up significantly. I've sort of baked his off-season troubles into that ranking. And I think you kind of have to, right? If I'm doing a draft right now, am I really going to take him? I think he's going to have to slide, knowing everything that's gone on and not knowing what the punishment's going to be for it. He's a guy like
he's had he's had all the charges dropped. I mean, this would be just the NFL just being sticklers, like, hey, you were associated with bad stuff, so we're going to suspend
all
you.
the charges dropped, or just
I believe
majority?
All the charges were dropped. I believe they all were. At least that's where I read on SleeperBot, but I could be wrong. Let me double check while you go ahead and talk.
So hopefully we'll see him get cleared, and hopefully we will see him on the field and he will play a full season. And if that's the case, he showed us last year he's a top 30 fantasy wide receiver. Regardless of what happens at quarterback there, they're a team that is going to have to throw the ball, and he's the best receiver they have. So I don't think there's any doubt that if he's going to play, he's going to be fantasy relevant and, a starter in fantasy leagues. I just think the question is going to be, will the NFL decide that, he sort of, made them look bad all off season, and they're going to find a way to hit him for a couple games or more.
Yeah, well, it was 9. It was 9 charges.
9 of the 12 or something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess the NFL could still slap him, but he's such a talent. I mean, you would hope that they would. I mean, I was high on him. Chris, like a couple years ago, And it was nice to see him have this opportunity, especially talking him up so much. But yeah, I mean, if he doesn't show up, then what? Then Nunua is going to be the guy. I mean, I've got a Nunua right now. Like if Robbie's gone, and Nunua's going to kind of be forced to be that guy. I don't really like Terrell Pryor other than his story.
Yeah, it actually.
Jermaine Kearse played fairly well last year, but overall, that's probably going to be a receiving core to stay away from, barring you're trying to fill out your daily fantasy roster and you're trying to grab, somebody at the very bottom to put in for $3,000 or something.
Yeah, there were two guys that Hus and I were both really high on last year. Well, one of them was Zach Ertz. We were in the Scott Fish Bowl last year, and they had a tight end premium, like an extra 1.5 for scoring.
Yeah, I was in it as well.
Yeah, awesome. It was a great league, great cause. Fantasy Cares, I think it was the charity that it was for. But I was, okay, let's take Zach Ertz. No, this round, take Zach Ertz. God damn it, guys, take Zach Ertz. Yeah. And we eventually did. Yeah, we eventually got him in probably, I think, the 7th or 8th round in a tight end premium, which was pretty great. But Hus and I were also pushing for Robbie Anderson, and that worked out really well for 5 or 6 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
Like, the guy is a wide receiver 1 talent.
He's a 1 talent, not 2. I mean, if you're putting him in wide receiver 30 territory, it's still baked in. I mean, they've got to figure out quarterback stuff. They got to figure out this. They got to figure out that. But talent-wise, he's already shown us that he's a 1. I mean, week after week. Like if you were able to trade him high, which I love doing, it's like, hey, take this guy. He's awesome. He's going to do this all year. You get rid of him, and he returns you awesome value. Like maybe Adam Thielen or something like that later or something, and you're smiling, you're grinning.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what he could do. We saw what he could do with McCown. I'm pretty confident that Darnold's going to get that starting job at some point this season. So that puts a little bit of a question mark there too, right? So I don't know. Right. I don't know if I'd be willing to move him into the top 20, but I think he could settle into the 20s at some point or around 30 there for sure. Just based on the talent. And also, though, you have to consider, even if he gets away and doesn't get suspended by the league, he's one of those Martavis Bryant kind of guys now where one more mess up and you could be looking at a mid-season suspension or something like that. So that always has to be in the back of your mind with a guy that gets into some off-field trouble like that.
Let's go ahead and move to tight ends here. We're running a little bit low on time. Looking at your rankings for this one, as of 9 days ago, I'm not sure if it's changed since then, but what makes you like Charles Clay and O.J. Howard over Cameron Brate? I believe you had them ranked 16, 17, 18 in that order. So once again, splitting hairs a little bit, but why do you like those guys over Brate, who's been a tight end 1 the last 2 years?
I will say that I think part of it leads to – and we're sorry, just to clarify, like we had with the Gordon Hunt situation, we're talking about having Clay over Brate here, right?
You had O.J. Howard as well. I'm not sure if you still have him.
So the way I have it ranked right now, are we talking about PPR or standard?
PPR.
And I don't know if you want to cut this out, obviously. Sorry, just to clarify all that.
Nah, that's cool. We'll leave it in.
So in PPR, the way I have it ranked right now is Howard at 15, Clay at 16, and Brate at 17. How convenient. They're sort of sandwiching him in there. I think a big problem, I would love to be on the O.J. Howard bandwagon this year, but the fact that they brought Brate back bumps both of those guys down a little bit. The thing that really keeps Clay in the mix still is, even though we're worried about the quarterback situation there and everything, that receiving core, they have Kelvin Benjamin. What are we really excited about outside of that? And Clay has shown in the past that when he's healthy, he can produce. Now, a lot of those big games were with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, so it does change things. But I think that Clay is still in the mix there to have, and we're talking about, tight end 2 seasons here across the board, but I think he's still in the mix to have a fairly decent season. Well, Brate and Howard are probably going to switch back and forth. We're going to see games where Brate gets the touchdown, and then we're going to see games where, for some reason, like last season, O.J. Howard goes uncovered and scores 2 touchdowns in a game, which was very strange how that happened a couple times last year.
Yeah, for sure. Hus, I know you're a big Cameron Brate.
Oh, my God. I mean, the guy that's top 7, I mean, he's on my sleeper list for tight ends. Touchdown. At least that's what he gave you weeks 3 through 6. While Brate and Jameis were healthy, the other 2 weeks he provided double-digit scoring in PPR leagues. Winston threw 19 touchdowns last year, and 6 was to Brate. And he would have definitely had more had Bray and Winston played together. I mean, he would have tied Gronk, Kelsey, and Ertz. That's elite production. The Bucs just extended this dude. Like I know it might be a head scratcher for a lot of OJ Howard people, but I don't know. I'm so in love with Cameron Brate. I love the value every year. I mean, he's basically going near undrafted. I don't understand the hate for this guy. I mean, look at the numbers. He's elite. Like I don't get it.
Where do you have him ranked?
Right now, 7.
Okay. All right. So big difference between you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Justin,
I don't
spots later.
I don't think that it's outright hate. I think also there's only so many balls to go around in that offense. And I really like Chris Godwin. We saw what he could do at the end of last season. I think he's a guy that's going to step up in that offense. And I think he's a big body guy that could start to take some of those touchdowns as well. And if they get anything out of the running game, right? If we start to see Ronald Jones making more plays in the passing game, from the running backs position, they didn't have that much last year. They didn't have that much exciting unless you were really into, Sims or something like that, which I can't imagine many people were looking at him in fantasy. So I think it also is a situation where looking at the projections and, how many targets there are to go around, I think some of that production is going to come away from Brate to feed to a little bit to Howard, a little bit to Godwin, and even maybe Deshaun. Like Deshaun didn't have much of a season last year. I think there's a chance that he could have a bounce back year as well.
Yeah, I'm just counting on what we saw. I mean, Winston's going to throw more than 19 touchdowns, I think. I mean, he missed some games. So if he's going to throw more than 19 touchdowns, I don't know. I just, maybe it's not hate, but I just don't see any of those other guys taking away. I mean, Jameis Winston is always like the tight end. He's all of a sudden going to stray away from tight ends. Like, I don't know. You got to take me away from it. I love the guy. I just bought his jersey on pristine auction. So I'm absolutely a fanboy of Cameron Brate. I love that they gave him the extension, and I'm going to be in love to get him in every league on the cheap. It's going to be awesome.
Let's move to our last guy that we're going to talk about from your rankings. I've heard this on several different podcasts, and I see it all over Twitter and even people on Sleeperbot making comments about this. You've got Ricky Seals-Jones at 21. Are you not buying into the beat writer and coach speak hype? Because a lot of people have him higher, and then there's even comments on fantasy apps and on Facebook and on Twitter from people, Ricky Seals-Jones, top 5 tight end this year.
I would love to see it. I hope it happens. I really, really do. It's sort of like going back to the Keenum thing, though, when you're looking at it and going, well, who are you really putting behind him when you're looking at the rankings? I think I have Austin Seferian-Jenkins above him. I could see an argument there. I think Seferian-Jenkins is going to step in, score some touchdowns, a bit of an unproven receiving core in Jacksonville. And Seferian-Jenkins has some talent. Been waiting on his breakout for a long, long time. So it's possible I could see him jump, Ricky Seals-Jones jump him. Njoku in Cleveland, a lot of mouths to feed there. And then he has so much talent. He's a top 5 talent at tight end. If he was on a team that was going to feature him, it would be outstanding. It would be talking about him as a guy that everybody wants in fantasy. So maybe not enough balls there for him, and maybe he drops below. I just don't see how far you can move him up the list. I think that Arizona's offense is going to be held back a little bit by their offensive line. I think that's going to be the biggest issue there. And I think that's going to affect the passing game we've seen. So I think a lot of Larry Fitzgerald probably is going to be in the cards, and a lot of David Johnson. And I don't know that they're going to be able to produce. Maybe you trust Bradford and Josh Rosen a little more than I do, but I don't know that I'm going to be confident in those guys producing, a third receiving weapon, because we have to think that David Johnson's going to get a lot of receiving work. And obviously Larry Fitzgerald, I expect to have another really good season. So I don't know if they're going to be able to put up, enough stats to have a third weapon there show up in the passing game for fantasy owners. Now,
if I recall correctly, you were a pretty big Ricky Seals-Jones fan last year. Where have you got him ranked?
Right now, I didn't finish my tight end rankings, but I did have him as a sleeper, though, just because I think he has that potential, and I do think that they could use him. I was a big fan of him last year. He didn't really produce as well as I would hoped, the first initial games, but, I like him as far as the eye test, and I like the coach speak, and I agree, though. I agree with Justin a lot. I don't think that either one of those quarterbacks are going to produce a tight end one. So I would have him ranked, I don't know, probably if I had to just, arbitrarily right now, maybe 16 or something like that. And I know that doesn't sound like a sleeper, but I think he definitely has upside of a one. Not top 5 though. I don't see it.
All right. Well, hey guys, that is the last player that we had time for. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, and as you lovely listeners have heard and know, Sleeper Wire is a charity. We're dedicated to making a difference in people's lives. That's the whole reason we do the show, and the whole reason we do the Sleeper Wire Pro-Am. To enter for a chance to play in the Pro-Am, it's pretty easy. Go to GoFundMe.com/RobJR and donate. Every multiple of $10 will get you a raffle ticket for the Pro-Am, so donate $10, it's 1 ticket, $30 you get 3 tickets, and so on. Then take a screenshot of that, send it to sleeperwire@gmail.com, and go to sleeperwire.com/Pro-Am for more details. Hey, Justin, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun, guys. I appreciate you having me on, and I really love what you're doing here, so keep it up.
Yeah, we appreciate that. This has been a fun show. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can follow you, find your rankings, all that good stuff?
They can get me on Twitter at Justin Boone. I'll post pretty much all my content there. They can also download the Score app. The Score app's an awesome sports app, and it also has all of my fantasy content on there, so it's another reason to grab it.
Yeah, it's certainly great. You can follow us on Twitter at SleeperWire Show. You can follow us also, Hus and I individually, at Seymour SleeperWire and SleeperWire Hus. Find us on SleeperBot at Professor Chris and Prophet Hus, and on the Fantasy Life app at Professor Chris and Hus the Prophet. Well, thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next time.
We want to thank you for listening to the Sleeper Wire Show, the most interactive and accessible fantasy sports podcast out there right now. If you want to reach us anytime, you can join our new Facebook group. Just search for Sleeper Wire Fantasy Football Club on the Facebook groups. Join us there. Find us on the Sleeper Wire channel in the SleeperBot app. We're on the Fantasy Life app, and you can go to our webpage, sleeperwire.com. Look for the advice section. You can send us email questions we answer within 24 hours or less. Oh, and lest I forget, we do 2 live shows a week during the season, the Wednesday Mail Sack and the Sunday Morning Blitz, where we answer your questions and take your calls live on the air. So keep in touch with us all year through these ways and more, only on the Sleeper Wire Show.